Oh, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. We are so delighted to have you all here. We're going to get started this evening or morning or afternoon, wherever you all are in the world. We're just super excited to have you all here to talk about understanding your financial aid award. I am joined this evening by my wonderful colleague, Beth Post, who is our Director of Financial Aid, who will be able to answer many of the questions that you all have in mind, especially during this part of your admission season. So just know that we will continue to receive your questions as we progress throughout our evening during this time. But before we get started, I wanted to point out a few features of our webinar today. At the bottom of your screen or on your phone, you'll be able to find the Q&A feature. Please know that you are more than welcome throughout any point throughout our time to send your questions along to us. We are joined today by two of our wonderful admissions colleagues, Deanna and Mindy, who are excellent, who are working in the background in answering those questions as needed. Also recognizing that we're going to answer a few of those questions live, especially as they pertain to you all as admitted students and families. Please know as well that this session is recorded, and so we will be speaking specifically in general terms as it relates to our financial aid process, our awards, terminology, and things of that sort. But please know that we will provide some resources for you to ask individual questions to follow up with a member of our team, in Beth's team, in this space to support you in your next steps. And of course, if you are unable to join us for the entirety of this evening, of course, we are recording, but we will send this information to you via an email. So if you would like to share this with a parent or guardian or a counselor in this space, or if you just want to refresh your memory based on what is shared this evening, please know that that recording will be available to you shortly thereafter. And of course, last but not least, I want to say, and we want to say, congratulations again to our admitted students, whether you were admitted via our Early Decision 1 process, Early Decision 2, or newly admitted as of March 16th amongst our regular decision applicants. We just want to extend a warm welcome and a warm excitement that you have gotten this far. This is amazing. We understand what the nature of a late March, early April timeframe may look like for you, particularly if you're in your senior year or if you're pursuing a gap year, or even perhaps being an international student and navigating, different timelines as well. We know there's a lot on your plate. So thank you so much for being here this evening. And we are just incredibly excited that you have decided to spend your time with us. But without further ado, I would like to introduce my colleague, Beth, and we'll go ahead and continue with one of our first questions, and probably one of the first questions that you all have today. But beforehand, Beth, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Beth Post. As Janessa mentioned, I'm the Director of Financial Aid here at Skidmore. I've been at Skidmore 14 years. I've been in the business over 30 years. So hopefully I can answer most of your questions, and I look forward to our evening tonight together. Thank you.
Yes, yes, yes. Let me tell you, Beth is absolutely wonderful and a wealth of knowledge, not only Beth, but also as well as her team in this space here. And so we're going to begin our conversation today with some overarching questions that may be on your mind. And of course, I see you all on the side of my screen here with some great questions that are already coming through the Q&A. So please continue to send those along, and we will be happy to respond to as much as absolutely possible. But the very first question, which is probably the elephant in the room, Beth, as you and our families are likely aware, the U.S. Department of Education overhauled the FAFSA for the 2024-2025 academic year. After a number of delays, we know that the department is in the process of sending processed FAFSA information to students and to colleges, right? Will these FAFSA delays affect the financial aid award notifications that our admitted students have already received?
That's a great question, and it's probably gets at the most popular question the Financial Aid Office is hearing from families right now. So at Skidmore, luckily, we use the CSS profile financial aid application as our primary application. And the information that families have provided on there is what has allowed us to put together the financial aid estimates and send out award notifications to our families. So our process at Skidmore really hasn't been too affected by the what everyone's calling the FAFSA fiasco, the delays and technological issues with the FAFSA. That being said, the way in which it potentially could affect financial aid eligibility is if the information you've put on the FAFSA is very different from the information that you've provided on the profile. That would be a rare occurrence, but eventually we'll be looking at the FAFSAs when we receive them and can review them. And, if there are major differences because of mistakes, we'll find those and reach out to you. But by and large, for the most part, for our families, the Skidmore grant is based on the data on the CSS profile. The federal and state eligibility is estimated from the data you provided on the CSS profile. So as good as that data is as good as the solid nature of your financial aid award. So I mean that to be, I'm working from home and my cats are running around. So sorry if you hear any of that, but you can rely on the financial aid data that Skidmore has provided to you to the extent that the data on the CSS profile is accurate. We know too that some of your other schools that you may be applying to are only using the FAFSA, and so there could be issues with other schools and getting the information to you. That should be starting to roll out really quickly now. Skidmore has started receiving those processed FAFSAs just like all the other schools in the country, and our systems are gearing up to be able to process that. So hopefully things will be smoother for everyone, schools and students, from here on out.
That's excellent feedback, Beth. And just to re-emphasize what Beth has just mentioned, really thinking through the role through which the CSS profile in Skidmore's perspective has provided us great data to assist us in developing a financial aid award that is as close as the information as you have provided. And so at this particular time, we understand that some of you are going to be navigating, decisions, in the upcoming weeks. And we're happy to share what our next steps are a little bit later on in our time today. But I will share that we are ready and able on a case-by-case basis to extend that deadline for students who are looking at their options, particularly regular decision applicants in that space. Thank you for that, Beth. So our next question is, when you are really looking at the financial aid award, we know that for some, there are lots of different terms. You may see Skidmore grant, you may see an endowed scholarship. Can you share a little bit about the different types of financial aid that a student may see in their financial aid award? We can start off with grants. We can also talk a little bit about work study and even maybe perhaps a small loan.
Sure. Right. So as you look at your financial aid award letter, boy, there's lots of information there. We've got our award letter, which outlines the different things we believe you qualify for based on the data we've received from you. There's federally regulated data that we have to also provide to you on what's called a shopping sheet, the end of your packet of financial aid papers. We've got a page in there for defining terms and conditions to give you more details about what to expect and how to understand things, and a page that outlines what you can expect your out-of-pocket might be to Skidmore, your expense after financial aid toward your bill. So on that financial aid award letter, you might have some grants that we estimate you qualify for. That could include Skidmore grant. Skidmore grant is our need-based financial aid. It's a grant. It does not have to be repaid. It's not a merit award. It's based on your family's financial circumstances. And so we've determined that based on your family and household situation, the number of people in the household, how many are in college, parent income, student income, parent income, student asset. We look at all of that and analyze that information to determine your need. And if you demonstrate need, then you qualify for some level of Skidmore grant. So the grant is the best kind of financial aid award you can have on your financial aid award letter. There are other grants besides Skidmore grants that you might qualify for. You might be a Pell Grant recipient. That's a federal grant recipient based again on your financial need and your family's income and assets and all of that pulled together in an analysis that we do. So if you qualify for the federal Pell Grant, that's a grant in addition to, in most cases, Skidmore grant, and that amount will be listed on your financial aid award letter. If you're a Pell Grant recipient, then we add on something called the Federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, which is another federal grant that Skidmore awards to its federal Pell Grant recipients. In addition to those federal grants and that institutional grant, Skidmore grant, you might also qualify for a state award. If you're in New York State and your income level is a certain amount, then you might qualify for New York State Tuition Assistance Program, or TAP. That is a grant as well, and that source of that grant is New York State. So there are really three types of grants you could qualify for: federal, based on your family's financial circumstances; state, based on your parent and student income; and then Skidmore grant, which is also based on financial need. I can continue on to talk about the student loans. So if you are a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, then we also evaluate you for federal student loan eligibility. And there are two types of federal student loans: the subsidized student loan and the unsubsidized student loan. You may have one or the other or both types of student loans listed on your financial aid award letter. If you've qualified for the subsidized type of student loan, that means the government is going to pay the interest on that student loan for you for the whole time you're enrolled in college. It's the best kind of student loan that a student can be awarded because no interest is accruing. But you have to demonstrate financial needs. So not everybody qualifies for that kind of student loan. And so if just an unsubsidized student loan is listed on your financial aid award letter, that means you still have access to borrow funds to help finance your educational expenses, but the interest on that type of loan is accruing while you're in school. The good news is you don't have to make payment on either type of loan while you're in school, enrolled at least half time, but interest is accruing on the unsubsidized loan and it's not accruing on the subsidized loan. The interest rate has not yet been set. These are both fixed rate loans that have a 10-year repayment term. The interest rate is not set for the upcoming year until the end of May. For the 23-24 academic year, the interest rate was fixed at 5.5%. That might go down a little bit next year. It's difficult to predict, of course, but you'll all know that before you actually have to take the steps to borrow the student loan. So you can make an informed decision. You don't have to decide that kind of thing right now. In addition to those student loans, there's work study that you might see on your financial aid award letter. Many of you, probably almost all of you who got a financial aid award letter will see work study listed. And that could be Skidmore work study or federal work study. It doesn't really matter. It just helps us identify the source of that funding. But from the student perspective, you have access to the same kinds of jobs. Our first year students who wish to work in dining services. You don't have to, the good news is you don't have to search for a job and hope that there's a job available, which is how work study works at some other colleges. You can work at Skidmore if you wish to work. All first year students are in the same boat. If they wish to work, they're assigned to dining services, and there's a variety of jobs in dining services. You might be swiping students into the dining hall or working in our Starbucks coffee on campus. And we have other eateries, and it could be the traditional thing that many families think of, which is cleaning up in the dining hall. So there's a variety of kinds of jobs, but any student who wishes to work at Skidmore, I'll repeat, is able to do that. And the work study award listed on there is intended to let you know that, and let you know that you have an opportunity to work and earn some of your funding to help you with incidental expenses. So listed on your financial aid award letter are estimates for tuition and required fees, housing and food, but also an amount about $2,800 that's listed that we estimate you may incur, like those kinds of expenses for personal expenses, books, supplies, and local travel. And the work study job, the earnings from that are really intended to help you with those kinds of expenses. It's just a part-time job on campus. The student gets earnings, they're taxable earnings, just like any other job, but then they can use those funds to, do their laundry, save up in a semester for some books for the next semester. And that's what work study is intended to be used for. So hopefully that's helpful information.
Absolutely, absolutely. One, Beth, thank you for breaking down all of those different components. We talked about grants, we talked about loans, and then we also talked about the work study piece in that way. And I will say, I'll put out a plug. We have wonderful opportunities in the Office of Admissions as well. In full disclosure, had the opportunity to work as a student, as an undergraduate as well. And so just know that a lot of these opportunities on campus in the part-time job perspective, just as Beth has mentioned, can of course be used to refine your skills, transferable skills in ways in which that will support you for your next step. We also have a great art museum on campus where students can also be employed. And so again, there could be a variety of different options, and we ensure that our students have the opportunity to know what those options are when they step foot on campus. So definitely something to consider there. Thank you for that, Beth. So I see that the questions in the background are coming. Thank you all so much for continuing to ask these questions, and our colleagues, Mindy and Deanna, who are wonderfully responding to them as well. There is another question that I would love to ask you, Beth, here. As we understand that some students and families may have circumstances that have changed even since they submitted their application, what is the best way to communicate this with your office? And also, what if the family's circumstances haven't changed, but affordability is a struggle? So it's a two-part question.
Really, yeah, great questions. And I'm sure the reason a lot of families are tuning in with us at this moment. So yes, circumstances change. And as you pointed out, even after the family has submitted the CSS profile, and families should be in contact with our office, and you can call our office or you can email our office. We do have Zoom appointments that we've blocked out for Wednesday afternoons for this afternoon, but also next Wednesday, a week from today, and then the week after that. But then we can make any kind of arrangement with the family that works best for the family. But you need to share that information with us, otherwise we won't know. And those special circumstances could include parent losing a job or reduction in hours, medical expenses, those kinds of things. If you need additional financial aid to help with those kinds of situations, then you will talk with a financial aid counselor. At Skidmore, every family is assigned a financial aid counselor for their 4 years. And I'm a counselor of, a section of students, and we have 3 other financial aid administrators that are counselors for families. And we'll develop a rapport and a relationship, and you'll explain whatever the situation is, and then I'll ask you for documentation or additional information as needed. So we'll work through a process if something like that is happening in the family. In addition to, sorry, I'm distracted here. In addition to, if your circumstances have changed, even if they haven't, let's say you have your financial aid award letter, your situation is exactly as described on the financial aid application, but you and your family just are not able to make, Skidmore, a Skidmore decision because it's just not affordable for you. You just don't feel like maybe it's real close, maybe it's far away. Contact the financial aid office, reach out to us, let us know. We'll go through that process with you. We'll talk through the financial aid application. We may collect more materials from you. We may ask you some questions. Like I just had this afternoon, I had a family who I spoke with who the information, I just wasn't sure, and they provided follow-up information, tax returns and W-2s, and sure enough, there was something misreported, and now I'll be able to help them further. The Skidmore will be able to help them further. So that's not to say that every family who contacts us, we are able to assist. Sometimes we've done as much as we can possibly do within our financial need-based criteria, which is the criteria for our Skidmore grant. But often there is something we can do to help and allow, access and make Skidmore a little bit more affordable for a family. So don't hesitate to reach out. We're just a bunch of, financial aid administrator people. We're not scary. We're easy to talk with, and we want to hear from you if Skidmore is not affordable for you. If it is, then super, that's great. We're glad to help you understand anything you're not sure of, or answer any questions you may have.
That's excellent news, Beth, and I would love to emphasize what you just mentioned of being able to communicate that information to our office. I will share with you the great deal of opportunities that we have, within this perspective is being able to be as personalized as we absolutely can to the extent that we can. And so just know that Beth and I have observed this as her colleague. Beth and her team have done such an excellent job with our students and in our families, especially as those circumstances arise in those perspectives. So those are some pieces that I wanted to emphasize there. At this time, I am taking a look at all of these wonderful questions that are coming through, and they are coming fast and wonderfully. So I would love to divert a little bit over to these questions here from our audience. Some of our questions, in particular, they're kind of looped into different spaces, if that's all right with you, Beth. And,
yes, sure, that's fine.
Excellent, excellent. And this is kind of connected to the previous question, but there are several questions about the appeal process in terms of financial aid appeals. Can you share a little bit about what that process looks like at Skidmore and any other information that you believe our family should know?
Yeah, sure. So at Skidmore, it's not particularly formal, and that's good news for our families. What we do is set up a time for you to talk or Zoom with us, and so we can get a sense of what it is, where's the difficulty, what's the challenge, and it gives us an opportunity to look over the financial aid application again and look at particular areas that we may have flexibility with, or that we may want additional information about. And then we'll say, go ahead now, we've had this conversation. I understand where you're coming from. Please send me or your financial aid counselor an email describing more fully that whatever your situation is, basically the basis for your request for additional consideration. I'll ask you probably, or your financial aid counselor will, to upload to us a copy of your 2022 tax return and W-2s, just so we can verify the data that you've put on the profile. We'd hate to make a change and then you would enroll, and down the road, we'll have a copy of that tax return or that tax information and W-2s and find that we have to make a change back the other way because we've discovered an error on your financial aid application. So it's good for us to have that up front during the appeals process. The financial aid administrator will review that. We have a financial aid appeals committee that meets at least once a week. It's chaired by our vice president for admissions and financial aid. The financial aid counselors and our vice president will sit around and discuss the situation. The financial aid counselor will present your case essentially and sort of tell your story, and we'll have some options. We'll present, okay, this is the situation, I think we can help a little bit here, or this is the situation and I don't think we can, there's not really anywhere for us to go with need. The vice president will have the student's admissions file, which is helpful in supporting whatever our decision is. We'll come to a decision, and then the financial aid counselor will email the family back whatever that decision is. So whether we can help, whether we can't help this year, but we're looking ahead 2 years and see that the younger sibling will be enrolled in college. We can even provide estimates of financial aid eligibility for those future years when you've got a change like that coming up, so that you know that, you know, Skidmore promises to meet your financial need each year, not just the first year. You just need to reapply on time every year. And so when we see that all else being equal, there's going to be an increase in need because, for example, there'll be a sibling in college, we like to let the family know that so they don't think that financially it's staying stagnant at the first year, but that we're here to support and help throughout the changes the family is going to experience. So, so the process is contact us, have a conversation with us, provide supporting documentation, and then you'll hear back from us. And it's a pretty quick turnaround, so it's only a few days. So it's an easy process.
Thank you for breaking that process down for us. I know that many of our families are navigating this in different spaces currently. So thank you for sharing specifically how we approach it at Skidmore and how we can best support our students in their decisions. There are a couple of questions here as it relates to the financial aid award. And of course, particularly the Skidmore grant. And is it the same all 4 years? And of course, you know, assuming that a family's income stays the same in future years, can you expect the grant to kind of go along with it? Can you share a little bit about
Yeah,
that?
absolutely, great question, because you know, some students and families are receiving merit or non-need based awards at other colleges, and they start to say, well, I know I'm going to get that award every year. I'm worried about this need-based award. What does that mean? Or I anticipate there being changes. What will that mean? So, you know, as I've said, it's a need-based financial aid award. Each year, the student and family reapplies by completing the CSS profile. And if you are a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident of the U.S., you also complete the FAFSA and provide W-2 supporting documentation. And so we reevaluate need each year. Our costs are going to go up a little bit, as you all know, from year to year. And then we look at what the family can contribute based on the data on the financial aid application so we can determine your need. But we determine your need in the same way we have the first year. So we are consistent in the way in which we determine your need. So the only reason the Skidmore grant would decrease is if your financial situation has substantially changed, not changed by a little bit, but substantially changed, you know? So you can rely on the financial aid award to the extent that your financial and family situation stays similar to what it has been as you reported it on the CSS profile. So I don't want anyone to worry unnecessarily about, oh, I got a good award the first year and now that's going to disappear. That's not an arbitrary thing. The only way is, and I'll just repeat myself, the only way in which your Skidmore grant or your total grants would decrease is if something substantially changed for the better in your family's household. So otherwise, you can count on the financial support of Skidmore to continue to be there in the same way in which it is right now.
That is excellent, excellent feedback. And thank you to all who asked that question. I imagine that others had those questions as well. So thank you for presenting that for us. So Beth, there are a couple of questions here that relate to the process of marrying need-based and merit-based scholarships, even outside scholarships as well. So the question is, does Skidmore stack scholarships? And also, what is the process of how outside scholarship awards affects the Skidmore overall financial aid award?
Right. So we only have Skidmore has two non-need based awards, two merit awards. The Filene Music Scholarship, which was a competition that was held on campus just this past weekend, and the Porter Wackenheim Math Science Computer Science Scholarship. Those two scholarships are added on to any need-based aid up to a maximum of tuition, required fees, housing, and food. So if you've got grant that covers all your billable, you know, expenses and required fees and all of that, then we stop there. So you can't get paid in scholarships to go to Skidmore. So there is a limit. And a few folks may hit that limit, but mostly these merit scholarships are on top of any need-based financial aid that Skidmore is awarding. Outside scholarships are similar. So we allow those to be added on to the financial aid award that you have, up to a maximum in grants of tuition, required fees, food, and housing. So very similar to our own internal merit award. If you win an outside scholarship, almost all the time, that's added right on and to your financial aid award, which reduces the amount that your family would otherwise be paying to Skidmore. So good news there.
Thank you for that. That is really, really helpful. And I imagine for folks who are kind of thinking about the calculus behind those pieces, that's incredibly helpful. There is an excellent question here about the federal direct loans. And there's a point of clarification is, are the federal direct loans listed parent plus loans? Are those the same? And also, how do you get info on the rate, the term, etc., if a family chooses that route?
Yeah, so the there are 3 federal loan programs. There are 2 student loans, the subsidized loan and the unsubsidized loan. The maximum a student can borrow in those loans is $5,500 for first-year students, $6,500 for sophomores, $7,500 for juniors and seniors. Beyond those loans, and the interest rates are better on those loans than on the federal parent loan, there is a federal parent loan that the government makes available to parents to help finance their son or daughter's educational experience. And that's called the PLUS, Parent Loan for Undergraduate Students. If you go to our webpage, skidmore.edu/financial aid, all one word, financial aid, in the left-hand margin, you'll see a link for loan information. And if you go there, there's an additional link for a federal parent loan and the current terms and interest rate, which will be different for the 24-25 academic year, but you'll see what they currently are for the 23-24 academic year. But the federal parent loan is an unsecured loan. The interest rate's a little higher, therefore there's no security that the government has other than your promise that you will be able to repay that loan over time. So it's all under the umbrella of federal loan programs, but the first 2 are where the student is the borrower, and the parent loan, the parent is the borrower. So that's the difference. The maximum parent loan is the difference between the college's cost of attendance, which is tuition, required fees, food, housing, and that about $2,800 for miscellaneous personal books and supplies that you're not charged. And so it's the difference between that combination of expenses and all the student financial aid. That's the maximum a parent can borrow in 1 year to finance their son or daughter's educational expenses. And those parent loans can be borrowed each year. They have to be borrowed each year separately. So let's say there's $10,000 difference between the student's financial aid and our costs, and you borrow that in a parent loan this year. And next year there's, $10,500 is the difference between our costs and the student's financial aid. You could borrow $10,500 next year, et cetera. Whether or not you're approved, it's based on your credit history. It's not based on your credit score. It's not based on debt to income ratio. The government's going to do a credit check looking for things like recent bankruptcies, et cetera. And so those are the qualifying factors of borrowing that federal parent loan. The student has to have the difference between the cost of attendance and their financial aid, and the parent has to pass a credit check. There are no credit checks for the student loans. The student can have bad credit, no credit, good credit, it doesn't matter. The student can borrow those loans in their own name. It's the parent loan that has the credit check and is a financing option.
Excellent, excellent. And thank you for sharing that information as it relates to the Parent Plus loan, and also emphasizing that that is an option, but not a requirement for our families in that space. And so that is an option that our team is able to provide assistance and guidance on in that space if you have any individual questions there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anybody who's wondering how much can I borrow? What does that look like for me? Just reach out to us. The parent loans are not listed on the financial aid award letter. They're not part of the award letter. Only student financial aid is listed. So parent loans would be in addition to what, if you choose to borrow one, it would be in addition to what you see on the financial aid award letter. Thanks, Janessa. Yep.
Oh, of course, of course. Thank you, Beth. There are several questions here as it relates to the total cost of attendance. So I appreciate all of these really great nitty-gritty questions because they're so helpful as it relates to the extent that a financial aid award can be applied to certain pieces. The first question I want to ask you, Beth, is does the financial aid award, does it differ if a student lives on campus or off campus or chooses to opt into a meal plan or out of a meal plan? What does that look like?
Yep, that's a good question. So the basis of financial need, it starts with the student's cost of attendance. So yes, if they live off campus, their estimated cost of attendance would be different than if they live on campus. All of our first year students are required to live on campus in a, basically almost always a double room, sometimes a triple room, and with a full meal plan. So we have a standard cost, and that's what's listed on your financial aid award letter. That's a double room cost with a full meal plan. That's what we've accounted for, and that's what most students will have. In the upper class years, a student may decide to live off campus in an apartment, let's say with friends, and then not be on the meal plan. And so my cat is, oh my God. So if they're living off campus, we factor in that they'll have to buy groceries, pay rent and utilities. And so it's not like we're factoring in zero in the cost of attendance, but it's probably going to be slightly less than if they're on campus and using the meal plan, which is basically buying 3 prepared meals a day. So buying your own groceries naturally, intuitively would be less expensive than being on a meal plan. So we look at that and we adjust that for inflation and whatnot every year. So we have realistic estimates if a student does live off campus. And also if they're an upper class student, many of our upper class students are really eager to live on campus in what we call our on-campus apartments or townhouses. So they're gorgeous living spaces on campus, and they have small kitchens. Because they have kitchens, the college, you're not required to be on a meal plan. You can still purchase a meal plan, but you don't have to be on a meal plan. So when we're looking in the financial aid office there is a differential in the price of the housing. It's significantly more. And you could look at this right on the Skidmore Bursar's office website for this year's rates if you're interested. So it's significantly more to live in those townhouse apartments. But because you're not required to have the meal plan, you're saving money on that side. So assuming if the student doesn't also sign up for the meal plan, but instead buys their groceries and prepares their own food, it usually works out to be pretty equivalent. So the financial aid often doesn't change, and the family's contribution might actually decrease a little depending upon the student's expenses and how they do with managing a budget for groceries. So I hope that clarifies. There are varying budget baselines, but for first year students, it doesn't really apply because everyone's on campus in a dorm with a full meal plan.
That is incredibly helpful in that space. And I will put a nod to those student apartments. They have a great view of the Adirondacks in that space. They're great, highly coveted
Yes,
amongst
they
our
are.
students. So of course, these questions are continuing. So one great question and another to your question as it relates to the total cost. How does financial aid impact if a student wants to study abroad?
Yeah, that's a good question too.
Yes, or even during the summer semester too, does it extend?
So very different answers there. So if a student goes abroad, and many, a high percentage of our students do go abroad. We have a great, broad, in width and depth, a broad program. So if a student goes on one of our many approved programs, we say it like this: their financial aid goes with them. So we look at the baseline cost because that's the main driver year over year of financial aid eligibility. And we have a homeschool cost. So we continue to charge our tuition, the students receiving our credit. And so the financial aid is based on our level of tuition. And then some programs, Skidmore is also charging room and board. Some programs, the students in a home stay situation and not. But we just like if a student were living off campus and studying locally, we still consider those expenses as reported to us and estimated to us by our study abroad office. So basically, what you probably would find most helpful at this point to know is that, yes, you can continue to be eligible and qualify for the same kind of financial aid as if the student were studying on campus, with usually a little bump up for costs related to travel. So we consider the airfare that you might have for going abroad in our baseline budget, increase the budget for that. And if you already have Skidmore grant and your budget's increasing, that means your Skidmore grant is essentially increasing as well. So there's usually a little bump up in grant if you're a grant recipient if you go abroad. You have a maximum of two semesters abroad with financial aid adjustment due to being abroad. I mean, you can go more, but we won't be increasing your Skidmore grant for that third semester if you were to do that. Most students are pretty happy with 2 semesters. London first year experience, that's a different situation. We do not count that toward the 2 semester limit of studying abroad at Skidmore with grant. Oh, and summer, you asked about summer. So there are a maximum of 8 semesters of Skidmore grant eligibility. So you would not want to use your financial aid over the summer because then you would be short a semester unless you were to graduate early. So if part of your plan is to graduate early and you want to take semester work at Skidmore, then the student would communicate that with the financial aid office, and then you could use one of your 8 semesters over the summer.
This is excellent information. And just so you are aware, Beth, we are receiving great feedback from our audience for you're answering your questions so thoroughly. So thank you so much for these pieces here. There are some questions, and particularly I want to focus on our international students as it relates to grant recipients for this population of students, in really understanding what does it apply. And I imagine some of what you just mentioned may apply to our international students as it relates to airfare, but do you mind extending also as well in terms of what happens over breaks, for students as well?
Yeah, so most of what I've said tonight is also applicable to international students, except for the parts about the FAFSA and W-2 submission. But 8 semesters maximum eligibility, studying abroad, even if you're an international student, that all works the same way. We have some very highly aided students, both international and domestic, for which we have some special support in place. And that includes staying over breaks. If you're a very highly aided international student who can't afford, for example, to fly home for Thanksgiving break or winter break, then we have arrangements that you can make to stay on campus with the approval of Residence Life and our international student advisors. And if you happen to be in the opportunity program at Skidmore, those folks, those program administrators, will also work with you to see if you need some special additional support as well. So we do have additional support available to students who have a very high level of need at Skidmore.
Thank you. I appreciate your sharing that information as it relates to not only our international students, but the opportunity program as well, and knowing that we have great wraparound support for several cohorts on our campus. So I'm looking at many of these questions, and I'm just going to give a huge verbal shout out to our colleagues, Mindy and Deanna. They are typing away and sorting these questions for us, so that way we can focus on overarching pieces. And thank you so much for coordinating here in the background. There are a few more before we end our time today, as it relates to some questions. Kind of talking about if you thinking about financial aid as it relates to your course of study. So does the financial aid award change if you double major? Will a grant offer increase? What are some of those differences that students face?
Yeah. Trying to think of a few of those things. So no, if you change your major, double major, that does not at all affect your financial aid eligibility. Your grade point average does not, in fact, affect your Skidmore grant eligibility. I mean, obviously, we want our folks to do really well, but sometimes there's a semester where there's a difficulty. That's all fine, as long as you are doing well enough to continue to study at Skidmore and meeting our, overarching like college, not Skidmore grant minimum standards, then you are able to continue with the Skidmore grant. It's not affected by your grades, which should be a relief. I mean, we do that so that you don't have to worry about being able to continue to afford to stay at Skidmore and have the additional pressure of having that tied to your grant assistance. You should be doing well for all sorts of non affordability reasons. So we like that it's not tied to your grade point average. So if you decide to take additional credits, if you're approved at a certain point, you need to be approved by the registrar's office to take extra credits, maybe 20 credits a semester. There are no additional tuition charges. So we have basically a flat rate that is full-time tuition, and you have the flexibility to go between 12 and I think 20 credit hours without there having any impact on your bill, and therefore no impact on your financial aid as well.
That is excellent. And thank you for that clarity. And there is a follow-up question that was just submitted as it relates to dual degree programs, particularly dual engineering degree programs. The extent to which a Skidmore grant can be used at other universities, or is that possible?
Yes, that is possible. So we have a great program, for example, with Dartmouth. And it's a 3-2 program. And so it's 3 years at Skidmore and 2 years at Dartmouth. For 4 of the years, you still get to use your Skidmore grant eligibility for 4 of those years. The 5th year, financial aid would be between you and Dartmouth. But the first 4 years, it'll be so what we will do is in the financial aid office, if you're a Skidmore grant recipient, we will get the tuition fee, room and board cost for Dartmouth from Dartmouth. And that will be the basis for your costs of attendance and therefore your need. And we will continue to meet your need for the costs of Dartmouth. And then our business office, our bursar's office, will work with you to get access to the Dartmouth bill, and then we will send a check, which will represent your financial aid, directly to Dartmouth to pay that. They are trimester schools, so we will work that all out. So that's really good news for students who are admitted into that program, that they retain the same level of financial support. I have not heard any negative feedback in my 14 years on the 5th year of eligibility. I don't have any direct knowledge of how that has worked, except that I know that no student has, had any issue or complaint about the level of support that Dartmouth has in turn been able to give them for that 5th year. So I would say that's a really good sign, and we could follow up with more details about that if you needed to. If we needed to delve into that with you. So feel free to follow up with our office if you have more questions about that.
That's an excellent piece. And I'm glad the question was asked, especially as we think about some of those dual degree programs and how it works with other institutions. And thank you for providing that example with our partner with Dartmouth College. And so as we continue, just for our last couple of questions here, I know we have some that relate to the student experience, particularly work experience. And so is there a particular rate that students are paid on campus? How many hours are they allowed to work? What does that look like?
Good question. So we have two rates on campus for student employment. I think it's 1175 if I'm correct. It's around 1175 for almost all students. And if you are a student who's a supervisor of other students, then you have a higher rate, which I believe is 1250. It's about that. It might not be precisely right, but it's close to those figures. And so the amount listed on your financial aid award letter is $2,600 for all students. And as a first-year student, that would mean you'd work between 5 and 7 hours a week in order to earn that $2,600. So that's just as a first-year student. And as I said, all first-year students are assigned to dining services, and that seems to work out, fine for most students. And you will, if you enroll at Skidmore, you'll be sent a survey over the summer that says, do you intend to work on campus for this year? And if so, what kind of hours do you like? Do you like to work weekends or mornings or evenings or middle of the day when class is not in schedule in class for you? And so you'll work that out, and you'll also indicate how many hours. You can work as little as 3 hours a week if you want to. You don't have to work at all. You can wait until your sophomore year, and the sophomore year and later, we have a job marketplace available. So as Janessa was saying, admissions hires work study students, financial aid hires work study students, the gymnasium, the library, alumni affairs, academic areas all hire student employees in the labs. And I mean, everywhere you can think of at Skidmore, we have over 1,200 of our students who are working on campus. All of these jobs are listed in this job marketplace, where students submit as many applications as they'd like, and they can hold as many jobs as they like. And as an upper class student, you can earn up to $4,000 in the academic year. But so that's how that whole process works. It's especially the first year students, it's a minimal number of hours, it's low pressure, it's there's training, it's you get to network with other students you might not be living with or in class with, and you get a kind of a deeper connection to the college when you work on campus. Now this was a few years ago, but our students who work on campus have higher GPAs than our students who don't work on campus. They're learning time management skills. Even if they're, working in the dining hall, they're, developing relationships with a supervisor. They're being, accountable for their time. They're having to, if they're sick and they have to miss a shift, they're building these employment skills that are absolutely transferable as they continue out through their additional career at Skidmore and beyond. So it's low pressure. It's no pressure if the student decides they really want to just focus the first year on getting acclimated and figuring out what it means to be a college student. That's fine too. They can pick it up as a sophomore, junior, or senior. I hope that answered the question.
It did. It definitely did. And I think it's great to know what those options are. And there is one follow-up question, just for clarity. So with work study, it's included in the aid amount. So that out of pocket looks maybe lower than it is. Is that how you would describe it? So even though it's actually money that the student earns and receives a paycheck, it's kind of building in a little bit of a cushion. That's the little bit of the question. I don't know if I'm explaining that correctly, but
well, I'm guessing that it goes to, well, if a student is earning these funds and it's not going to tuition, what does that mean? Well, factored into our cost of attendance on that financial aid award letter is a section that's indirect costs, things that Skidmore's not charging, that we know the student will have to buy some books, some supplies, do their laundry, have incidental expenses. The work study is intended to go toward those books, supplies, and incidental expenses. It's not intended to go toward tuition fees. So, you know, in the financial aid award letter, we've removed work study on the second page and the block that's estimating what your out-of-pocket expense may be, because work study doesn't go toward the bill. So in that, we're just looking at what are your billable charges, less any grant you may have, and less the loan if the student decides to borrow the loan. And then work studies off to the side, part-time job on campus, funds available to help support students with those indirect expenses, partially from the federal government, mostly from Skidmore College.
That's excellent clarity there. That is incredibly helpful to consider in that space. And I'm going to answer this one out loud. There was one student who wanted clarity. You know, if you work more than 7 hours in that space, will you be able to still receive compensation if you work more than those hours per hour? Yes. The answer is yes. It is that part-time job in that space where you will be allocated that. So I see you here in the background there. All righty. So one last question. We are going through so many pieces here. Of course, we've talked quite a bit about completing the CSS profile every year is necessary for both our domestic and our international applicants. So that's an emphasis here as well. The last question that is pertaining to the FAFSA, and of course we can wrap up with the final piece of advice as well, is does a student still need to complete the FAFSA if I have a Skidmore award at this time? Will you still need to submit it, particularly for our U.S. citizens and eligible non-citizens?
Right. So, yep, that's a good question, actually, that I appreciate someone asking. So at Skidmore, our policy is you don't need to do the FAFSA. You don't until and unless you enroll at Skidmore. At that time, we need the FAFSA from our domestic students and U.S. citizens who have a financial aid award, because it's through the FAFSA that we're going to verify the income data that you estimated or reported on the profile. So rather than collecting a copy of your tax return, we require we require you to complete the FAFSA. And it also is required if the student is going to borrow any federal loans, or the parent wants to borrow a federal loan, or the student is awarded federal work study or any federal grants. So we have to have it in order to process those federal funds, and we need to have it to verify the income data that you provided on the profile. So, but yes, but only upon the student enrolling at Skidmore. You don't have to do it for us in advance of that.
Excellent, excellent question, Beth. There's one piece here I want to squeeze in, and it just came up. It is about medical coverage with financial aid. To the
health insurance?
Yes.
Yes. So health insurance is a tricky topic, and at Skidmore, you need to opt out of health insurance if you can prove that your health insurance coverage meets Skidmore's requirements. And there's information about that on the Bursar's office website, so you can get more details. For our very highest aided students in the Opportunity Program, very highly aided international or domestic students, we do assist with the health insurance costs if health insurance is required by that student. But otherwise, no. If a parent wanted to borrow a federal parent loan and finance some of that cost, we could add that into the budget for that purpose, but not for Skidmore grant purposes, unfortunately, I'm sorry to say.
Thank you for that clarity, Beth, and thank you for allowing me to share that question, which was a very important question to ask for this group. One, I am just so grateful to be able to do this work with you, a partner in this really great purpose of supporting our students here at Skidmore. Thank you for bringing your absolute wealth of knowledge and expertise to this incredible group of students and families. There's some really great comments that are coming through as well, just sharing how much they appreciate it.
Ah,
For our families here, please know that we will, and of course, have this recording for you available. So if you want to go back and look at some of these pieces and to listen, I know there was a wealth of information. You may see a cat or two, which is really exciting as well. But we hope that this has been informative, that has been supportive to you as you are making your decisions here. And for those who are coming to Skidmore, we hope that this is supporting you and feeling more equipped as you transition to your next step here. Some next steps moving forward, admitted students in your applicant portal, you will see a series of other sessions. Tomorrow night, we'll be hosting our first year experience opportunity so you can learn a little bit about what does the process look like for registering for classes, that first year, support, faculty engagement, student engagement. What does that look like for you? And of course, again, we want to signpost opportunity specific, to financial aid after today, that we do have one-on-one opportunities for you to connect. So students, please pay attention to your email there as well. Again, thank you all. We hope you have a good night, good morning, good afternoon. Beth, I hope that you have a great good night, good evening as well. And we look forward to staying connected with you all.